Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It started like any other Thursday evening, the kind that creeps in without making a sound, wrapping around you with a dull familiarity. I was attending a company retreat at a rustic lodge tucked high in the Blue Ridge Mountains trees, whispering. In the wind, the wooden deck creaking beneath worn boots and business shoes. The place had a kind of forced charm, the kind that looks beautiful in a brochure, but feels lonely when you're 3 glasses into cheap wine and surrounded by people you only ever half care about. Derek had kissed me goodbye that morning as I left for the trip. A soft, barely there kiss, followed by a quick reminder about garbage pickup and a drive safe. We had been married for 10 years, and I don't say this with cruelty, but I think I'd stopped truly seeing him long. Before that morning, or maybe we had both stopped seeing each other. Our life was orderly measured out in grocery runs, back-to-school nights, and text messages about picking up almond milk. It was stable. It was safe. It was boring in a way I couldn't admit. Out loud, I arrived at the retreat a little before dinner, checked into my room, showered, changed into a blouse I'd worn a dozen times before. I looked in the mirror and wondered if I still looked good, if anyone would notice. And then I hated myself for caring. Dinner was held in a large wooden banquet hall, where the sound of cutlery clinking against plates mingled with surface-level laughter and over-rehearsed networking pitches. I found a table at the back, one of those half-occupied ones, and took a seat near the end. I remember staring at the melting candle wax in the centerpiece, wishing I was back in bed with a book and a locked door dot. Then he sat beside me. He asked if the seat was taken, and I shook my head without really looking up. When I finally did, something in my chest pulled tight. His name was Adrian. He was from one of our partner firms, in town for the same event. He had an ease about him, nothing performative or pushy. Just present. I don't even remember exactly what we started talking about. Something about how stale the bread rolls were. But I actually laughed, and it startled me, because I hadn't done that in a long time. The conversation flowed in a way that felt effortless. We joked. We told stories. He asked about my work, and then about my life, and I found myself answering with honesty I didn't expect. I talked about my kids, about how tired I'd been lately, how hard it was to feel like more than just a list of responsibilities. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He just listened. And he looked at me, not through me, not past me, at me. Later, when the banquet started to thin out and people began migrating to their rooms or the lodge bar, I stood to leave. He stood too. It wasn't planned. It just happened. We ended up walking out to the large deck overlooking the mountains. The view was breathtaking, but I barely noticed it. The sky was full of stars, the kind you never see in the city, but it was his presence that I felt most. We leaned on the railing, and the conversation quieted. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was weighted, expectant. And then his hand brushed against mine. I flinched not from discomfort, but from the sudden realization of what I wanted. His hand didn't move away. It stayed there, and mine stayed beside it. I haven't felt this in a long time, he said quietly. Have you? I didn't answer right away. Because what was I supposed to say? That I loved my husband, but I felt invisible? That I sometimes stood in the middle of my own kitchen and wondered what had happened to the woman I used to be? Instead, I whispered, "No, I haven't." He turned toward me then, and his hand cupped my jaw so gently, as if testing the moment. And then we kissed. It wasn't rushed or lustful. It was something deeper, tentative and sad and full of yearning. I remember how still the world felt, how far away everything else became. But I pulled away. I told him I couldn't, that this wasn't me, that I needed to go. He nodded, didn't press, just said, "I understand," and watched as I walked away. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, guilt crawling up my spine like 1,000 whispers. I hadn't slept with him, but something had been broken, or maybe revealed. I didn't sleep much that night. I stared at the ceiling and thought of all the small ways a person can betray someone, not with bodies, but with silence, with omission, with wanting. Over the next few weeks, I tried to pretend nothing had changed. I came home, I kissed Derek. I folded laundry, I showed up. But I was no longer the same. Adrian texted me once, then again. And I responded. It started small, an article he thought I'd like, a joke about retreat food. Then longer messages. Then a call one night when Derek was working late and the kids were asleep. I didn't tell him to stop. I didn't block the number in my heart. I knew I was already in dangerous waters. But the attention felt like oxygen. He remembered things I'd said. He made me feel desired, relevant, real. Not just a wife or a mother or coworker, but me. I started comparing. The way Derek looked at his phone during dinner. The way he didn't touch me as often. The way we made love like we were crossing off a chore. And then I hated myself for doing that. Because Derek hadn't changed. I had one night. Adrian asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. No strings, just coffee. I stared at the message for a long time, phone heavy in my palm. I didn't go. Instead, I wrote back. I can't keep doing this. I need to figure out who I am without you in the middle of it. He replied only once. I hope you do. Because whoever that is, she deserves to be happy. That night, I told Derek the truth. I told him about the retreat, about the kiss, about the conversations I'd been having, about the things I hadn't told him for years, the loneliness, the disconnection, the aching need to be seen again. Didn't yell, he didn't accuse. He just stared at the wall behind me, hands trembling slightly. It was the quietest kind of heartbreak. We went to therapy. We had long, hard conversations. I cried more in those months than I had in years. So did he. We peeled back the layers of our life together, the ways we had drifted without even realizing. And slowly, so slowly, we started rebuilding. Not everything is perfect now. Some days I still think about Adrian. About what could have happened if I had let myself fall further. About the version of me that existed only in that brief window. Of time with stars above and his hand on mine, but I don't regret choosing to stay. I don't regret choosing the harder road. Because that night changed everything, not just in the way it threatened to pull me away from my marriage, but in the way it forced me to come back to it. Honestly, it was the moment I realized how fragile love can be and how fiercely it's worth fighting for. He sat beside me that night, and everything changed. Time has a strange way of both healing and haunting. After the confession, after the late night arguments and quiet mornings filled with the weight of unspoken thoughts, there came a stillness between Derek and me. Not the peaceful kind, more like the eye of a storm, where everything holds its breath. He slept in the guest room for a week, not out of rage, but confusion, hurt. That hurt clung to everything. The way he passed me in the hallway with a silence, so loud it rang in my ears. The way he stared out the kitchen window during breakfast, like he was trying to look for answers in the trees. There was no yelling, no melodrama, just that heavy, unbearable quiet. I remember one night, I found him sitting on the back porch in the dark, a beer in his hand, staring at the stars. The same stars I had stood under that night. He didn't look at me when I stepped outside. After a long moment, he said, "Did you love him?" I answered honestly, "No, but I think I loved how he made me feel." He nodded slowly. That's what scares me more. We didn't say anything else that night. Therapy was a mess at first. We fought more in those sessions than we did at home. Strangers watching us, scribbling in notebooks, while we spilled the intimate, crumbling details of our marriage across their floors. But it helped. Little by little, I realized how much the things I had internalized, the things I never told him. How I missed being touched for no reason. How I hated that he never noticed my new haircuts. How I longed to be asked questions, real ones, not about bills or schedules, but about me. He, in turn, revealed things I hadn't even considered. How often he felt like he was failing. How sometimes he avoided intimacy not because he didn't want me, but because he was afraid I no longer wanted him. How he thought my silence was indifference, not exhaustion. We had both been wrong. And we had both been complicit. There were good days too. We started dating again. It sounds ridiculous after 10 years of marriage, but it felt like we were strangers trying to learn each other for the second time. We went to a jazz club one Friday night, something I never knew he liked. We drank too much wine. We kissed in the car like teenagers. That night, he touched me like he hadn't in years, not with urgency, but reverence, and I cried after because I felt loved and forgiven and terrified I didn't deserve either. Adrian faded into the past like a watercolor memory still visible if I squint, but washed in the distance. I never contacted him again. He never tried either. I think in his own way, he knew that what we shared wasn't meant to last. It was a mirror, not a home. He reflected something I needed to see in myself at that moment in time, and then he stepped aside. There are still moments where the guilt resurfaces. At church, at dinner with friends, during quiet nights when the kids are asleep in the house. Feels too still. But I carry that guilt differently now, not as a weight, but as a reminder that love isn't passive. It's a daily choice that it's easy to fall into neglect, to assume that the years stretch out forever and the person beside you will always be there. But love can starve in silence. It can rot beneath routines. It can fade without screams or slammed doors, just 1,000 quiet omissions. We nearly lost each other. And in some ways, we did lose the first version of ourselves. But what we have now is different, sharper, more deliberate. He touches me more often now. Not just sexually, but gently a hand at my lower back, a thumb grazing my wrist, a playful tug of my ponytail when I'm washing dishes. He makes coffee for me on weekends. He sends texts in the middle of the day that say nothing more than thinking about you. I do the same. I ask about his dreams. I tell him when I'm overwhelmed instead of pretending I've got it all under control. I stopped being afraid to need him. We're rebuilding, brick by brick, and still some nights I sit outside under those same stars. I remember how lost I felt, how one man's glance pulled me to the edge of everything I thought I knew. And I feel grateful not for the betrayal, but for the reckoning it forced, for the way it cracked me open and demanded that I face the hollowness I'd been pretending not to feel. That night changed everything. Not because I cheated, not because I was caught, but because I saw myself with terrifying clarity. I saw what loneliness can make you do, what silence can steal, what comfort can cost. He sat beside me that night. Just a simple thing, but it was enough to wake me up, and I've been awake ever since. Some things didn't go back to the way they were. Some never should. The truth is, even after all the therapy, the conversations, the second chances, I was still afraid. Afraid that what happened that night wasn't just a mistake, but a message, a warning, that there was a version of me buried. Underneath the wife and the mother and the professional, a woman I had let wither in silence. And I was afraid that one slip of honesty, a conversation, a touch, a kiss could crack my whole life apart. There were moments when Derek and I would lie in bed, facing opposite directions, and the distance between us felt like another continent. Other times, we'd cling to each other with such intensity that it almost hurt, like we were both terrified that loosening our grip might undo everything we tried so hard to repair. He never once threw it in my face. Not in a fight, not in frustration. That was the part that broke me the most. His restraint, his dignity, his devastation held so tightly in his chest that I wondered if he would ever truly let it go, or if he was just learning to live beside it. One night, months after everything, we were folding laundry in the living room. The kids were asleep. The TV was on but muted. Out of nowhere, he said, "Do you still think about him?" I froze. The shirt I was folding slipped from my hands. I answered honestly again. I owed him nothing less. Not him, but sometimes I think about who I was. When he saw me, Derek didn't speak for a long moment. Then he nodded. I get that. There was something unbearably kind in that moment, something that stung. He wasn't just forgiving me. He was acknowledging that he had failed too. That maybe we both had. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had let it go further. If I crossed that final line and slept with Adrian, would it have ruined everything? Or would it have revealed truths even faster? I don't know. I never will. And maybe that's the blessing, but the temptation didn't end with Adrian. That's the truth no one tells you. Infidelity isn't just a person, it's a possibility. Once that door opens, it never truly disappears. It lingers, quiet and patient, testing your moments of weakness. The real change came when I understood why I opened the door in the first place. It wasn't because of Adrian's charm or the wine, or the stars. It was because I had become unrecognizable to myself. I had built a life that looked perfect from the outside, but I was missing from the picture. I wasn't alive in it. I was maintaining it, protecting it, faking it. So I started to change, not for Derek, not even for my marriage, but for myself. I began writing again, journaling, things I hadn't done since college. I went on walks alone without making excuses. I found a yoga studio. I bought dresses that made me feel good, not just ones I thought Derek would like. I started laughing louder, saying no more often, choosing me without apology. And Derek. He noticed one morning over coffee. He looked at me and said, "You're different." I panicked for a second. Then he smiled, really smiled. "It's good I've missed her." That morning I wept in the shower. The kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that come not just from sorrow, but from relief. From finally feeling like someone saw the parts of me I'd buried so long I almost forgot they existed. Years have passed now. The memory of that night with Adrian is still there, but it doesn't burn anymore. It's softened around the edges, dulled by time and understanding. I think of it the way you think of a scar, visible, permanent, but no longer painful to touch. It was a turning point, not a definition. A necessary fracture. Derek and I are not the same couple we once were. Our love is quieter now, not flashy or dramatic, but it's deeper, earned. We take time, we check in, we touch more, we listen harder, and some nights, when the kids are with friends or sleep early, we sit outside again, on the porch, 2 glasses of wine. The stars above us, timeless and still. He'll sometimes take my hand in the dark and squeeze it. No words, just presence. And I know despite everything, because of everything, we made it through. But I also know something else. I'll never forget that moment, when he sat beside me. When I felt seen again, when something cracked open inside me and showed me what I had lost, because everything really did change that night, and somehow, eventually, for the better.